My first feeling of Africa was when I arrived in Cape Town. You couldn't but feel that. It was wonderful. Africa is the most wonderful place. Once you've lived there, there's nowhere like it. I did midwifery. I trained midwives in the hospital called the Queen Victoria Hospital in Joburg, where Christian Barnard was. Yes. Well, that was the hospital where I trained the midwives because they hadn't any midwifery training. So I went and trained them, and I used to take 8. I had a little Austin car, and I trained about, I'd have 8 with me at a time in this little car, and it was lovely, but it was hard going because you'd no backups there. You couldn't run into another hospital. There wasn't one, and you were in the and being a place with no colour bar, you had no colour bar, so you went either to blacks, whites, greens, pinks, whatever needed you. You just went. You didn't think about the colour of them or anything. We had to go to Paris to the Sorbonne and enter their course on civilization in Africa. I enjoyed that part of it because I was learning the language as well. Because I always felt that I wasn't a missionary. I was just the missionary's wife dragging along. But I was a midwife, and so I had a lot of medical training in England, which was very good.
Did you deliver?
Yes, I delivered lots of babies, but they were very, very good in Madagascar. They had their own brand, and they only sent for me when they were in trouble. And I had a boy that he called himself a dispenser, but he was just a help, really. And so we would go on our bicycles. He would ride in front of me in case there were any animals. There weren't many, as I told you. There wasn't much for crocodiles and lemurs, that was about, and monkeys, of course. The place that they put the missionary sent us to was called Saratanana, which means a good place, but it was a bad place. There was a river there that I say was crocodile infested, and one day when we were going on to the mainland, and we only had to cross on this ferry, which was logs of just this way, tied together, and the piroguier, as he called himself, he had to know the temper of the tides, because the Mazamba River runs through Madagascar, and it's a very important river, and they got tides of all different kinds. I had 4 different kinds of stoves for cooking, because I had 4 people. I had a boy and a girl, and the people that lived on the mission, and so I had to provide for them, and it was very difficult because we were 1,000 miles nearly from a shop. And there's a woman that used to have a cow that would calve about every year, and from her we used to get the milk, but it wasn't pasteurized, it was black. And so it meant that we had to use the candles to sift the black off, so we could drink it and then boil it again, so there was no, as much as you knew, you'd no trouble there. But I didn't tell you that John had to go and do a medical course at the London Homeopathic Hospital. You would know that hospital. And they were very, very good people there. And he learnt dentistry, so he pulled teeth as well. We had a good clinic, and he even pulled one for me. Everything was hard going. No water, and when you've got 2 children, 8 and 10, excuse me, that have to be looked after and supposedly educated, it came to the thing that I just couldn't do it, because a missionary's house is everybody's house. and they knock on the door and walk in regardless of what you're doing. John felt that the Lord had definitely called him to Marafutsi, the tribe that we were with, were the Marafutsi, and it says in the books that they were thieves and robbers. And they used to call me Mrs. Egg because, because every village I went to I was asking for eggs. And most of them were brood eggs, and they were already half chicks inside, so we couldn't eat them or anything. But, and as I say, the milk was black, so it had to be filtered and boiled I don't know how many times. So the kids never knew what it was like to have cold water. We had a fridge, but of course everything had to come down the river with these awful bridges that used to come down. When the rains came, they just pulled the bridges down with. We had mail once a week. We had an avion sanitaire, which was an ambulance plane if anybody was to be taken out. We had no doctors at all. We had clinics galore that John and I ran, and he would have to go out on trek. They hadn't had a missionary in Saratanana district for 30 years when we went there. They'd all either died off or couldn't stick it. And so they sent us because we seemed to be tough. And we did quite well, but to me it ruined my marriage. I just couldn't take it anymore. I'd had it. I'd lost my father and mother, and I was an only child, and you know, you sort of have the guilt of that. What was I doing out in Madagascar where they didn't really need me except to deliver their babies, and even that they could manage on their own. So it was very hard going, and when people grumble about what it's like here, I go back to Madagascar and think to myself, gee whiz, I'd like to put you where we used to